Well, hello there. Brent here, the Bring Your Own Tools, and on today's episode, we're completely reviving this old siding to make it look brand new again. If you want to learn how to do it, keep on watching. Well, let's start it.
There is a number of things wrong with the south side of my house because this side by far gets the most sun year round. Okay, we are at BYOT headquarters and we're gonna do some painting today. And far away, it might not look so bad, but once you start getting close to this side of the house, you can really see all the paint is coming off. This side gets blasted by the heat and therefore we have a lot of boards coming up. And caulk around is actually wearing down and could become a very large water issue in the future. So we're gonna fix that. We also have some areas where we have some rust, which we're also gonna treat properly, do it all up correct, paint it right, and get it looking beautiful before the weather really turns around here. So let's get to it. With any quality paint project, it always starts with prep work. And for exterior projects, I always highly suggest pressure washing your house first before you apply your paint. I'm using a 2500 PSI pressure washer, but I'm using the wash nozzle, not the jet nozzle. Keep that in mind. And make sure you're not trying to peel away all the paint off of your house with a pressure washer. That's all we're trying to do. We're just trying to wash the surface because this side of the house is disgusting. You do want to make sure you're planning ahead of time and making sure you're not pressure washing and painting the very same day. And on my house, I even had to account for a few bird nests that were up here for years, as well as the fact that they made a few holes in my soffit. Yeah, not happy about that, and we'll be addressing that at the tail end of this video.
There you go. Pressure washing done, fully dried, but before we get to paint, we have plenty of other prep work to handle. First things first, some of these boards are still coming off, so we need to actually nail them down in place, as well as caulk and remove any of the paint that's actually peeling off. We want to make sure we have good quality bond strength between the new paint or primer to the existing structure, and that's very important, especially if you want a paint to last for years and years. So let's get to it.
For the siding that's coming loose, it's really easy to fix because all I had to do is take 3-inch galvanized finishing nails and hammer those in place because that really sucks in those loose boards and ensures us that this won't happen again in the future. But now that we have the loose boards taken care of, it's now time for removing any of this loose paint. And my personal favorite tool to use is the Wagner Paint Eater. This thing is amazing at removing any type of loose paint, which I did feature in a recent BYOT on how to refinish a railing, but this thing does an amazing job at removing all of this loose paint extremely quickly, easy, and efficiently. The one keynote that I have when using this device is just to make sure you're trying to remove the loose paint, not the paint that's actually still on there quite well, because this thing is strong enough to remove any paint off of wood. I'm not trying to remove all the paint on this house, I'm just trying to remove any of the peeling paint that will weaken the bond strength with our paint once we get to that point. Also, key note when doing this is making sure you have a proper respirator as well as eye protection. I'm actually wearing a respirator with built-in eye protection, which is really nice because none of this debris can get in my face, as well as I can protect my lungs at the same time. It's also nice to put some plastic down at this point because any of the debris that's going to be falling down is going to be getting into your soil, and we don't want that. We want to make sure we collect this and dispose of it properly. The only other nice tool that I have on hand at this point is a 5-in-1 tool. It does a really nice job at getting into some of those smaller crevices, especially if you have this vertical siding, because the sides of this paint are also peeling off in these specific areas, and I want to make sure we're removing as much of this loose paint as possible. Once we have all of the loose paint removed, it's now time for priming. But before we prime, you want to make sure we're dusting off this entire wall first so we don't have any loose sawdust debris in our paint when it comes time for priming. All I need for this is a leaf blower, and if you don't have a leaf blower, a trusty broom will work just fine. As for the primer we'll be using, we are using Smart Prime by Zinsser. The really great thing about this product is the fact that it's actually a water-based product, but it performs like an oil. Therefore, we have an amazing adhesion as well as performance longevity as an oil, but easy cleanup because it's water-based. As for the application process, I'm just using a small nap roller to evenly distribute the finish on all of the bare wood, as well as any other items that I'll be spraying later. Now we do have quite a bit of area that we need to prime, but that's because we had so much loose paint along the way. And I do highly suggest actually getting an extension for a small roller like this. It makes it really easy to apply all the paint while still on the ground, especially if you have a 2-story house like this. I'm going to be spending plenty of time on ladders on this project, and the less time I spend on ladders, the better. There was no chance of a roller getting into these vertical grooves, so I did take a paintbrush, and I actually had a paintbrush specific brace that I could actually brace into this extension, which made the application process extremely easy. Really nice handy tool to have on hand, and I'll make sure and leave a link for it in the description below. Once we have the priming application taken care of, it's now time for caulk. And for caulk, we are using Dymaflex Ultra by DAP. This is more of their premium line of caulk, but we definitely want to have the best caulk possible for this project because we want to ensure we have a caulk seam that will last for years and years and won't break down on us due to weather and heat along the way. I had a few horizontal siding boards that also came loose, which I did nail down properly, but after we had them nailed down, there were still a few large cracks, as you can see, which I filled with the same caulk. You also want to have good quality gloves for this application, as well as a damp rag to wipe off any excess on your hands or on your gun itself. And a fun little side tip is your gun actually has a cutting device built into the handle to cut off the tip of your caulk. I never knew this. Did you know this? Because I certainly didn't until I watched it on TikTok, of course. Now there are multiple reasons with going with a higher quality caulk, but keep in mind that price increase is just a negligible cost when you actually think about the large scheme of protecting your home and the fact that you don't want to do this again. And cheaper products will just wear down faster than this product because it's way more flexible. There are also quite a few miscellaneous cords that are strewed about that need to be tightened down, and I do suggest using a low voltage staple like this that's actually designed for exterior use, or if you have some heavier duty wires that need to be fastened down properly, to use the more sizable fasteners at that point. At this point in time, we're now going to be tackling the rusted portions of this pipe that we don't have to use any type of grinding or braiding the surface. All I'm doing is applying some brake cleaner to the surface and wiping it off with a clean lint-free cloth. And as you can see, some of this pipe is extremely dirty and oily, and you wouldn't want to paint this without removing it first. And if you've never used brake cleaner to degrease something, I assure you it's one of the best degreasers out there. Now comes time for actually painting this rusted surface, and for that we are using POR 15. This can actually be applied directly to the rust, yes, directly to the rust to seal it in properly and efficiently, permanently. I actually learned about this product on the YouTube channel Project Farm. It's another amazing YouTube channel where he does rigorous testing on multiple products to see which ones are up to snuff. As for the application portion of this project, all I'm using is a foam brush to evenly distribute the product over the entire pipe. Then just wait for it to dry, and as we're waiting for it to dry, let's take care of a few more large cracks. The side of my house has these larger cracks due to all the weathering and the fact that this is more of a weak point. For this, I'm going to be using Wood Epoxy by Avatron. Now, I have done a video on this product already, and some people did question the strength and durability of this product, but I can personally say that the product itself looks amazing and still to this day has not cracked or warped in any way, shape, or form. That way, I know for certain I can trust this product, and all you have to do is mix up 2 equal parts of the putty, make sure they're thoroughly mixed together, then apply the epoxy that comes with the kit to the surface that you're going to be using it on, let it dry, and once it's dry, you can take your sander with 200 grit sandpaper and sand it off smooth so it looks beautiful, or at least much better than it did before. Just make sure you re-prime the surface and let it dry before you start painting.
When it comes time for masking, we generally use 2 different types of tape. One is going to be your green frog tape, the other one is going to be your standard blue painter's tape. Now, the green frog tape is definitely more expensive, but that's because it has paint edge technology where it will actually leave a crisper line than your generic blue painter's tape. But that means that if we want to have nice crisp lines, use the green tape. However, if you just need to tape off an area, you don't have to worry about a crisp line, use the blue tape. It's going to save you more money in the end. So let's get to taping and masking.
The yellow device that's attached to the blue painter's tape is called out as a hand masker by 3M. It's a really nice device because it dispenses tape as well as the plastic or paper that it's dispensing. This makes it extremely quick and easy to mask off an entire window like this, or a door, or a garage, and so forth. Now, is it needed for every single paint project? No, but if you're doing an entire house with lots of windows and doors, make sure you get one of these on hand because it makes life a lot easier. When enclosing a window like this, I generally like to tie down the 2 bottom corners after I have the top fully installed, and then tape down all sides of our plastic. That way the window is completely encased. I don't have to worry about any type of overspray at this point. Also keep in mind that the window trim doesn't have to be perfectly taped off because at the very end, we're going to be applying our trim paint after the entire house is fully painted. After the windows are taken care of, I do tape off the concrete wall foundation because I don't want to get paint on this specific section. I've seen plenty of people paint it just the same color as the house paint, but I generally don't think that it's a good look, and I'll most likely do something, maybe a brick veneer like I did to the front. Let me know if you guys have any suggestions on what I do with this lower area, but for now, we're keeping it concrete. As you can see, I did use that green frog tape at the very bottom because I want a nice crisp edge, and then I come back around with our blue painter's tape and our paper so I can completely conceal this entire space cheaply and efficiently. Once we have this area taken care of, I go around the entire side of the house, making sure that anything I don't want paint on, I fully wrap and protect, whether that is our posts, our gas meter, our electrical meter, and our fencing. Now that we have everything taped off properly, I do go back around just to see if there's any areas that I can smooth up just slightly. I did find a few areas that needed to be sanded down a bit, so I did take my sander with 200 grit sandpaper and just went over those really quickly and easily. But guess what? It's now time to paint.
This is the Wagner Control Pro 170. It's an airless sprayer, which is extremely efficient when it comes to overspray, and it's so much better and faster than your standard paint roller and paintbrush. Keep that in mind because you will save a tremendous amount of time and energy when painting your house. Also, make sure you have a proper respirator and some eye protection along the way. Let's get this thing set up.
For the finish, I'm going with Ultra Spec Exterior by Benjamin Mohr. This paint color is actually the original paint color to the home that I chose about 5 years ago, and I'm just trying to match that existing paint color, but obviously reviving the house color to its original glory. I first mix up the paint thoroughly and then submerge the large suction tube into the paint while actually having the small suction tube in a waste bucket. obviously you can see that there's a spray and a prime nozzle. You set it to prime and you bring it up to approximately the 2 mark. That will actually bring the paint into the machine through that tube and out the smaller tube, which is specifically called the material return tube. Once the paint reaches the end of that smaller tube, I turn the machine off and then dunk that same tube back into the paint. I then switch the machine to spray, turn it up to a level 3, and then also attach the nozzle head to our spray gun. I test it out first, and the nice thing about this system is that if it does get clogged, you can actually turn the little green tab at the top 180 degrees, and it actually spits out any type of clog. Then of course you turn it another 180 degrees, and it's back to spraying properly. If you've never used an airless sprayer like this before, don't be scared because it's extremely easy to use, so much so that you don't even need to back brush this paint as you're spraying it on. Just keep in mind that you want nice, even, thin coats, and multiple coats should be applied on all surfaces. And as you can see, the POR 15 works as a perfect primer for this paint as well. The real beauty about an airless sprayer is the fact that you can get into so many tight-knit crevices and areas extremely quickly and efficiently with a spray gun like this. All this painting would take an extreme amount if you were just paintbrushing or rolling it on, but with a spray gun like this, it takes no time. The one thing I would highly suggest having on hand, especially if you're spraying, is to have an aluminum spray shield like this. This is a key item to have, especially if you don't want to try and tape off very difficult areas, like these wood soffits that I don't want to paint, but it would be really difficult to tape off properly, especially at this certain height. Luckily for all of you, I do have horizontal and vertical sighting on this house somehow, some way. And the thing about this vertical sighting to keep in mind is that you want to make sure you go in both directions, because if you don't go and hit both directions, then you're going to have areas where the spray gun just can't get to. So just make sure you're double checking both sides and spraying into those small little crevices, because you don't want to have any of that white showing through after you're done painting. At this point in time, I want to say a huge and special thank you to the sponsor this week, Wagner. I actually reached out to them recently and I was telling them that I was going to do a paint project for my house and they wanted to be a part of it. So they are the sponsor of this week's video. They sent me this amazing paint sprayer along with the paint eater, and it really did make this job so much easier. And if you want to see and check out their amazing lineup of sprayers, heat guns, rollers, and surface prep tools like that paint eater, I will make sure and leave a link in the description box below. And now, back to painting. And the one thing you do need to keep in mind, especially when painting a 2-story house, is inevitably you are going to be on tall ladders. And if you're on tall ladders, you want to make sure you're safe. And with a spray gun, I find that you're actually spending more time thinking about your safety than spraying, because the spraying portion is so easy. You just need to make sure you have the proper positioning on your ladder so you can do more DIY projects along the way. After I have this first coat taken care of, I do let this first coat dry overnight and come back to it the next day. Same exact process and setup for the second coat. I just want to make sure we have a very strong paint layer on this south side, because this south side gets so much sun throughout the year. Before we do our final paint spraying cleanup, I do decide to paint some trim that I'm going to be installing at the very top of our soffit. This is not going to be something that everyone needs to do, but personally I'm going to be doing it because I have birds that I have to account for. That's why I'm going to be installing plenty of PVC trim along the very edge of our soffit, therefore covering up all the holes that the birds made, as well as preventing them from getting back in. Sorry birds, no more freeloading. As for cleanup, I will provide a link in the description box below for a Wagner branded cleanup video, because it goes into full detail, but just know that I'm going to be using multiple water buckets. I shoot out any excess paint into the paint bucket until I actually find water coming through, then I switch it over into a waste bucket and shoot off any of the remaining paint. I also use the prime feature to make sure we flush out that entire hose until we get beautiful crystal clear water in the end. I I come back to our siding the next morning and rip off all of our paint protection, whether that's tape or any of the paper and visqueen that we used for protection. At this point, it's now time for our trim paint, and for our trim paint, we are using Ben's exterior paint, and this is just the factory white. I didn't even put any color in this, just their factory white, which works perfectly when you want a really nice, bright finish. As for the application portion, all I'm using is a foam roller, as well as a standard 2.5 inch or 3 inch paintbrush. The one trick that I have though with painting trim like this is to actually take a 6-inch mud knife and use that as a guide as well as a shield when you're rolling. This is a really nice tool to use in these small tight-knit areas because I don't want any of the paint being pushed onto our siding, and with that shield it makes it extremely easy and very quick to do. You can also use that mud knife while using a paintbrush. It's just going to be more used for tight-knit areas that the roller just can't get into. These small little details might be taken for granted at a certain point, but they really stand out in the end because you want a beautiful finish after all of this hard work, and having some perfect trim lines is always satisfying in my book. One keynote about this Benjamin Mohr paint is the fact that you really don't need more than one coat with it. It's extremely thick and provides a really nice finish with just one coat. So that's always nice in my book because the less time I have to spend on a tall ladder, the better. Although having said that, I am glad I actually filmed this because I never noticed how beautiful clouds were. Yeah, kind of captivating. Anyways, moving on. And as you can see, I did not disappoint with the woodpecker holes. Yes, these are in my soffit and were not fun to account for and take care of, but I personally had to do it, and hopefully you don't have to on your project, but in my case, with a PVC trim, they really don't like to peck through it, and therefore covering it up is going to be, I think, extremely vital in the long run for my own house sanctity. I'm using a finish nail gun to nail these in place, and the one thing to keep in mind is to make sure you're actually noting where the stud placement is prior to bringing up these trim boards, because it's a lot easier to find and nail properly if you know exactly where the studs are. But guess what? Now that we have that trim in place, all I have to do is reinstall my gutter, and guess what? We are done! I truly love how this paint project turned out. It was one of those things that was just an eyesore for years, and therefore walking by it every single day made me feel like I wasn't fully accomplished with this home. But now it looks brand new again, and is the siding 100% perfect? Well, you're never going to get perfect siding that's from the 1950s, but the transformation, as you can see, is remarkable, and one project that I can truly say is one beautiful, sexy beast. Oh yeah. Whoopsie daisy, playing a little too close to the sun.